So Blender 4.2 the LTS is finally here and available for everyone to download. This new release comes with a lot of features and will be maintained from now till July of 2026, making it suitable for artists and studios who would want to use a fresh version of Blender for production to hop right in. This brand new version of the LTS comes with a lot of features, and amongst these new features are brand new releases that the folks at Blender Foundation have worked on to improve the quality of life and performance of Blender in general, with some ground-defining features that would make working with various tools in Blender remarkably more useful. And for those who like to see some of the cool features that are now here, then you can simply go over to the link in the description that will bring you right over to the release note where you can see some of the cool stuff that are right here. And for those who like to download this, all you need to do is click on the download button and you'll be able to get this. This is currently available for Windows, Mac, and also Linux. And with that said, let's take a look at some of the cool features that are now available in Blender 4.2. With Blender 4.2 the LTS open up right here, the first things you notice is we have a welcome screen that we can now use to import preferences from previous versions of Blender, or we can continue with what we have. And with this, one of the things that you'd notice, like we mentioned with the LTS, is extensions. So right over here, you'd notice we've got a brand new icon, and if you simply click on that, you would notice that we've got a new section within the system settings of our preference to allow online access, and this is for extensions. So extensions are now a brand new way of you being able to install themes and also add-ons inside of Blender, and these are totally free. The folks at Blender Foundation have worked extremely hard on this one, and it is now here. And you can go over to the Get Extensions section and install these extensions directly from here. So in case you like to install add-ons or themes, you can do that by clicking on the install button, or you can go over to the extension website, look for the extension that you want, click, drag and drop directly in Blender. And for those who might be wondering, what about the thing that we talked about for the add-ons when we made the announcement about the updates for the add-ons? So if you'd like to install your own add-ons now, you can go over to the add-ons section and click right here to install from disk. The button which we were looking for previously that we mentioned that it would be nice to have never made it through. And the same thing can be said for the extensions as well. If you like to install the add-ons as well, you can do that from here by clicking, go over to install from disk and also install that too. Moving away from the preference window, within the status bar, there has been some significant updates that you would find. Shortcuts are now displayed iconically on the status bar as against write-ups that we had with previous versions of Blender. This now makes it more cleaner and concise. This is more visible when you're working with key maps and axis related operations. The status bar spacing is more tighter and is now better aligned. And overall, when you take a look at the user interface, you would also notice some scaling improvement. Now, before we talk about the menu, if you simply select anything and you hit the delete key or probably tap X on the keyboard, this now comes with a dialog. And this isn't the case with what you had with the previous versions of Blender. So now if you like to delete any stuff, once you press the delete key, you now get to see that. And the same thing can also be said when you're about to set anything to become a startup file. And still speaking about the menus, within the file section, you can now clean up and purge unused data, or you can manage used data. Another interesting thing you would notice is, for example, if you like to open up a file, probably you like to find exactly where this file is saved. If you go over to the file menu, you can go over to the open recent, right click, and you'll be able to open the file location. This brand new context menu has been added, so just in case you like to work with it, right now you can. And still on the file menu, you'd also notice that we have the export all collections. Now this is totally different from the export that we've got right here. And so what that means is this, that if you go over to your collection properties, you would notice that we now have an exporter section. So if you do have a particular collection you'd like to export, you can simply go over to that collection, click on the plus sign, and then you can add whatever file format that you want. If you like to export STL, or probably you like to export as FBX, you can. Each of these file types have their unique properties, so you can set these things up before you choose to export. And once you're done, you can click on the export all, or you can go over to the file section and export all collections, which will technically export this collection as these two file formats. Blender 4.2 now offers a more cleaner way of previewing files that you drag and drop before you accept them. So for example, for dragging and drop a simple STL file, you would notice that with 4.1, this is pretty much what we used to have, and with 4.2, we now have the validate mesh automatically turned on, and the options are now here. You would also notice that this looks slightly cleaner compared to what we have with this. The select menu now has an update with the arrangement of the select menu. The same thing can also be said for the sculpt menu within the sculpting mode. So these has different arrangements as well, as some things have been tucked in, for example, the show and hide, and also within the trim section. This is not the same thing that you've got with the previous version, as the previous version just simply exposes every single thing. Same thing can also be said for the object menu. So if we go over to the object menu, you'd now notice that we have the modifiers. So right here we can add modifiers, we can clear object modifiers. At the same time, you would notice we now have an icon for constraints right here. And that is not the case with what we have with the previous version of Blender. And for Asset Browser, you can now maximize your Asset Browser area. So in this case, if you go over to Blender 4.1 and lower version, you cannot do that. But if you're using 4.2 and above, you can now maximize your Asset Browser area. The pinning feature, which made its way to the properties section, now exists with modifiers. So at this point, you can choose to pin modifiers depending on where you like them to be when you're stacking your modifiers. And this can come in handy in some cases. It's also worth mentioning, if you like to create and save your own themes, you can now do that. This was a feature that was not there before, but right now you can now customize and save your own themes inside of Blender 4.2. Away from extensions and also the user interface, Blender 4.2 now ships with the brand new version of EEVEE. And with this, you can now do some interesting stuff. You can now light super easily inside of EEVEE and take advantage of the real-time displacement feature that is now supported in EEVEE. Just like you've got in Cycles, you can now set your materials to displacement and bump, and this would give you the same realistic displacement that you've got with Cycles right inside of EEVEE. EEVEE can now automatically extract intense light from the world environment and treat them as sunlight, improving the lighting quality and casting real-time shadows. The subsurface translucency is now always computed, and it no longer leaks between objects and has no energy loss. And in terms of volumes, the brand new updates to EEVEE now allows you to work with volumes easily. Detailed volumes now provide a much more stable result contrary to what we had previously. And of course, if you take a look at what we have with Blender 4.1 and also what we've got with Blender 4.2, you can tell that the visual quality is super cool. And that doesn't end there. Motion blur is now visible in the 3D window through the camera view. There's also an overall better quality when you choose to render, and in terms of viewport visualization, the image quality is way stable than what you've got with previous versions of EEVEE. And in terms of working with light, you can now work with hundreds of lights if you choose, and you now have unlimited BSDFs that can be used directly inside of Blender. These and more stuff are now available for EEVEE, so just in case you're thinking about working with it, right now you can. Of course, there are certain limitations, and these are within the attributes and properties: cameras, light probes, indirect lighting, shadows, volumetrics, depth of field, screen space effect, ray tracing, shader nodes, memory management, CPU rendering, multiple GPU support, and headless rendering. And for those who like to see a full list about this, I'm going to link it in the description so you can come through and check out some of the limitations that the brand new version of EEVEE now has. And for animation and rigging, there's a couple of cool things that are now here. Motion Path, like we mentioned previously, now uses the Team Vertex color. For sure, we do have an interesting update in terms of the graph editor, which we've also mentioned in previous videos, that 4.2 is significantly faster than what we had with previous versions. And when you're using an amateur in the stick drawing mode, you can now use bone colors, and there's also an added option to define the width of the wire of the custom bone shape that you're working with. Of course, there's some updates to constrain the drivers. There's a copy to global transform that is also available, and for the pose library, they've added an option to blend pose flips from the context menu. This was previously only available during the model mode, but by simply pressing down Ctrl on your keyboard before dragging the pose library item, this now automatically starts the flip mode, and this, on the other hand, was previously only available when the blending operation had initially started. And when working with shape keys, you can now turn off relative, as this would allow you play with the interpolations, which you can use to evaluate how you like the shape keys to interpolate across each other. Cycles now has a couple of interesting updates that deals with the Ray Portal BSDF, and also the principal BSDF now supports physical accurate thin film interference. And in terms of volumes, Blender 4.2 now delivers a more improved volume light sampling and also a more smoother result. There's also the blue noise denoiser, which you can also find here. So by default, this is what we get with the classic white noise, the blue noise, and also the blue noise denoiser. The Open Image Denoiser has been updated to Open Image Denoiser 2.3 for improved quality. There is also the new world overriding option for view layers, and for those who like to read up on some of these things here, then you might want to consider looking at these. And for geometry nodes, there's a couple of updates that are now available. Actually, the folks at Blender Foundation have also put together a couple of interesting sample files which we're going to take a look at. So one of them actually deals more with the brand new metric socket, which is now available, and this is the file. So for those who like to explore the brand new metric socket, then you might want to consider taking a look at this one. So what we have here is this stack of pizza, which we can play with. So we can choose to increase that, reduce it if we want, we can change the offset, okay, and we can also choose to rotate these things however we want. So for those who like to see this in detail, or probably you will just want to study how this works, then you can go over to the geometry node where you can see every single thing that is making this run, from the simulation all the way to how this has been structured. You do have every single thing here that can get you up to speed. Another interesting file that they've also added has to do with the fracture. So this demo file deals with the impact fracture tool, which they've put together, and it is looking really nice. And how this one works is literally this easy. So once you've got your stuff selected and you go over to the edit mode, this is a tool, and we've already talked about how you can make these tools. For those who haven't seen that video, I'm going to link it in the description. Meanwhile, for you to make these things working, we'll go ahead and select the face tool, select any of this part, click right here, and then we can choose to use the impact fracture tool to fracture this part. So once we have that selected, click, and there you have yourself some fracture. You can play with the iterations, and of course you can also choose to play with the seed. You can also go ahead and explode this if you want, and you can do this to as many parts as you want. You can actually get the download files from here, or you can go over to where you've got the demo page, and from the demo page you should be able to find these ones right here. And for sculpting, we've got 4 new tools, and these tools are from previous tools that have always existed, and they're basically polyline to trim, face set, mask, and also hide. So at this point, you can use the polyline mask to actually mask some points. So say for example, you like to mask this, you can simply do that. And if you like to use the hide, you can also go ahead, click, 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 and also click to hide that part. It's also worth mentioning that if there are also parts you like to use the face set for, you can simply go ahead and do that as well. I do think that this whole thing started from the line project, which was something that Pablo was working on previously, and ever since his departure from Blender Foundation, we haven't really gotten a lot of updates in terms of sculpting. And for the sequencer, there's a couple of updates that are now here. The way the sequencer now handles your timeline is very reminiscent of what you've got with DaVinci Resolve, with some improvements in terms of the timeline and how you play with handles that actually controls the strip themselves, down to you being able to identify medias that are missing, all the way to text having some improvements that has to do with the shadow offset, angle, blur, and also some outline options. The preview for the waveform is also super cool, and at this point, this now supports multiple drag and drop in of files into the sequencer. It's also worth mentioning that Blender 4.2 is now VFX Reference Platform 2024 compliant, as it supports the Python 3.11, OpenEXR 3.2, OpenColorIO 2.3, OpenSubdiv 3.6, and much more. And with the USD waxing strongly in Blender, we're also getting some more improved updates for USD, as USD now supports importing and exporting of hair curves, and if you like to import point clouds, you can now easily do that. One major update for files that I think a lot of people would overlook is the fact that collada or .dae files are now considered as legacy. And for those who are also thinking about working with multiple Alembic files, there is now a support for that, as you can now import multiple Alembic files inside of Blender. There's also this recent tone mapping that has been added to Blender 4.2. This is called the Chronos PBR Neutral Tone Mapper, and this is what it stacks against the previous one. So in the standard, this is what we got with the standard, definitely not so usable as of today's value. And we've got AGX, and right here, we've got the Chronos. So I kind of think that, Chronos is slightly overblown compared to what we have with this, as it looks like a combination of AGX and standard all put together. However, Chronos PBR Neutral is promised to enable faithful reproduction of the real looks the asset has. For those who are into compositing, the Compositor now utilizes GPU for acceleration, with more and more updates available for the Compositor. There's also some updates for the outliner for those who would like to check it out, and we've also covered lots of these things in our well-detailed video when we talked about the beta version of Blender 4.2. So for those who like to see all of that and follow up with every single thing that I've mentioned, and most probably you would like to catch up with all of this, then links to this is going to be in the description, so do well to check it out. And of course, if you like to get the Blender Market Essential Game Mode Toolkit that comes with a lot of add-ons and also assets that you can grab, then you can also take a look at the link in the description where you can get it. Like we've mentioned in previous videos, this is currently valued at 1,428.44 euros, but right now you'll be able to get it for 32.95, or you can get this for 27.95. Additionally, there's also the Ultimate 3D Creator Bundle that comes with 3D assets, HDRIs, and also tutorials. So if you're looking for heavy, high quality assets, or maybe you would like to get some of these beautiful HDRIs, or probably you like to learn a couple of cool things, then this is also available. All of these are valued at 2,888.46 euro, but at this point you can get them for 27.71 or 32.71. And all 34 items are right here, so if you like to grab them, then of course you can simply come over to this page and start claiming all of these. So this is it. Blender 4.2, the LTS is now available, and for anyone who would like to grab this, or probably you'd like to take a look at any of the things that we've just mentioned, and possibly you'd like to catch up with the links we've mentioned as well, then links to this is going to be in the description, so do well to check it out. Tell me what you guys think about this one in the comment section, and a huge shout out to the folks at Blender Foundation for making this possible. And of course, if you like this video or you learned something from this, you can go ahead and give a like, and don't forget to share with a friend. And I'd like to see you guys in the next one. Peace.